Happy New Year to you all and welcome to 2025. We are kicking off the year with probably not the most exciting video topic in the world, but an equally very important one. We're talking today all about cables. What are the various different types of cables you're going to need as a DJ, and where are you going to need them? Maybe you've got yourself some new DJing equipment over Christmas and you're thinking, I have no idea how to hook this up to my sound system. Or perhaps you're thinking of starting as a DJ in 2025 and you're thinking to yourself, well, I know I need a controller, I know I need a laptop, but what cables am I going to need to connect everything together? Well, I have got you covered in this video. Let's get straight into it. Now, when it comes to audio cables, I can't lie, I'm not an expert. I do know how to hook up DJing equipment and I do know when you are going to need certain types of cables, but I'm not an audio engineer, so I can't tell you how these cables work specifically. Now, with that out the way, let's kick off with our first cable. So the first cable that we are going to talk about today, and this is probably one of the most common cables that you are going to come across when you are out there DJing, and that is this cable right here. These are called RCA cables. Hopefully that is focused on the camera. Now, these are most commonly red and white. However, you can also find them occasionally with a red and a black. The black just replaces the white lead. There's no difference in it. For some reason, they just are red and black rather than red and white. As I say, I don't know the reasons why things are designed that way. If you're an audio engineer, there might be some slight differences. Let me know down in the comments down below. So most commonly, these cables are used for connecting multiple audio sources together. So you're connecting something to something else. So for example, if you have a CDJ setup, you will use RCA cables to connect from the CDJ into the back of the mixer. Or you might be connecting from the mixer into your sound system. Like, there are other connections and there are other cables that we're going to talk about for connecting to a sound system. However, if you have got a controller like this, which is the Flex 4, maybe you got one of these for Christmas, okay, the master output, as you can see on there, is an RCA output, okay? So just think of it as connecting different sources of audio together. Now, just to confuse matters, okay, and this is where you will need to check the different devices that you are connecting together, okay? Not all RCA cables are the same on both ends. This one is because it's simple. You would connect from CDJ into mixer, and both of them have the same connections, and this is where you need to check. But not all RCA cables are the same. For example, this RCA cable actually has RCA on one end, as you can see there, and it actually goes into a miniature jack. So you could use this cable, for example, to connect from the mixer, because you'd plug into the mixer using the RCA, and you could connect this to a mobile phone. So you can play audio from a mobile phone and go through one of the channels on your mixer. Going back to the example of the sound system where I said that you have the master output, which is RCA on the Flex 4, your speakers may not have this RCA input. They may have a jack input. This is a 1/4 inch jack input. So you might find that there are cables that are RCA on one end and 1/4 inch jack on the other end. So just bear that in mind when you are connecting various audio sources together. You need to check what the inputs are on each device, okay? Now, when it comes to RCA cables, they are usually sold in pairs like this. Next up, we have got XLR cables. Now, most commonly, these are used to connect from your mixer into the amplifiers or the speaker system that they are using. They're mainly used because they're slightly thicker than RCA cables and they're a bit more chunky, as you can see there. So they are most commonly used for connecting sound systems together. These are also used to quite often to connect a microphone into your mixer as well. So these are XLR outputs. Now, if you've got a Pioneer controller, usually your XLR outputs on the master, they normally only appear on more expensive units, so do double check. As I mentioned previously, the Flex 4, for example, does not have XLR outputs. It is usually only found on higher end devices, but this is most commonly used for connecting to amplifiers and speakers and connecting a microphone. Now, what is very, very important to consider is the inputs. As you can see there, you've got some that have got, little holes there. That's called a female XLR output, and the one with the 3 pins, as you can see there, is called a male XLR. So just make sure when you're buying the cable that it's male to female, because you can also buy male to male and female to female. So just double check that, make sure that you are purchasing the right cable for your application. If you're going out of a mixer, for example, you're most commonly going to plug in a female XLR to the output, and then you're going to plug in to the speaker with the male XLR, but that is not always the case, so you do need to double check. Once again, just to confuse matters, XLR cables do not need to necessarily be XLR to XLR. You sometimes will find this combination, which is XLR to 1/4 inch jack. Most commonly, booth monitors, the booth input in the mixer will be a 1/4 inch jack, not, especially on Pioneer mixers, you won't get 2 XLR inputs. You will get a jack input for the booth monitors. So you will need to plug in this into the speaker system and this into the mixer. So just bear that in mind. And as mentioned before, you can get RCA to jack and also RCA to XLR as well. The other use, as I mentioned previously, for these XLR cables is for a microphone as well. So now we have covered off some of the most common audio cables that you are going to come across in your career as a DJ. Let's talk about some other miscellaneous cables that you should know about. First and foremost, power cables. Nothing that exciting, but here in the UK, we have 3-pin power cables to most DJing appliances, CDJs, mixers, all of that, turntables, they all use these 3-pin power connections. I think in most other countries it would be the same. It may not have the 3rd pin, which is the earth connection. However, here in the UK that does. And we've got these weird 3-pin plugs here, but of course that will vary depending on which country you are watching from. But yeah, power cables quite cheap to come across and pretty generic. Next up, we have got these cables here, which are Ethernet cables or Ethernet. I never know, but basically, when you're using CDJs is probably when you're most likely going to come across this, or if you work in IT, because these are basically networking cables. And what this allows is for the CDJs, basically it allows them to talk to one another. So when they're all linked together, it means that you can use one USB stick plugged in, say, the deck number 1, and it will read that USB stick on deck number 2, deck number 3, deck number 4. The other thing that you can do as well is plug in the mixer. Some mixers like the A9, the DJM 900 Nexus 2, also support an Ethernet input. Now, if you're using Ethernet with a Pioneer mixer, this is how you activate that red ring around the top of the jog wheel. So if channel 1 is plugged into deck 1 and all of the Ethernet is all linked up, basically when you move the volume fader up, you get that nice little red ring just to identify which deck is playing. Also, Ethernet is quite critical in the mixer to get quantized to work properly as well. So just bear that in mind. But yes, Ethernet cables. Now you can plug one deck into another directly and the decks will talk to each other. However, if you're plugging in 2 or 3 CDJs plus the mixer, you will need what is known as an Ethernet hub in order to network all of the tracks together. Also, this is critical, this cable, if you want to use Rekordbox in export mode, but with a laptop as well. That's how I connect in to the CDJs. So Ethernet cables, very important. And then finally, before we finish, we also need to talk about some computer cables, USB cables, very, very important for controller DJs. Now, most commonly nowadays, I think you're going to see more and more of these little ones, which is USB-C to USB-C. If I want to plug in this Flex 4 to my MacBook Pro, then I will need a USB-C cable. However, I completely understand that some people don't have that yet. And so it's USB-A and USB-B, which is most commonly used. A lot of controllers will still have a USB-B, which is this square looking one, as an output, and then you would go into your laptop with USB-A, which is this kind of long flat one. So just double check your connections before you buy any cables. Quite often with controllers you will get a USB lead supplied as well. So there we have it, some common leads and cables that you are going to need and come across as a DJ. Hopefully that was nice and simple and I explained it well for you. Do let me know any questions down in the comments down below. Happy New Year. Hope you have a really good 2025. Please do give this video a thumbs up if you haven't done so already. And if you have made it this far, please do subscribe to the channel. I'm literally on the cusp of hitting 10K subscribers. So your support does mean a lot and I do thank you in advance. See you in the next video.